Have you ever noticed that the people who damage your life the most rarely carry a weapon? They don't need one. They use doubt, they use guilt, they use manipulation, they use your emotions against you until you begin questioning your own judgment. And the most dangerous part, you often don't realize what's happening until you've already lost your confidence, your peace in months or even years of your life. Here's a truth that most people never learn. Toxic people don't win because they're stronger. They win because they understand your reactions better than you do. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is not to argue harder, not to prove them wrong, not to seek revenge. It's to become someone they can no longer control. Today, you'll discover exactly how to do that. Rule 1. Stop expecting them to change. One of the greatest mistakes people make when dealing with toxic individuals is believing that enough patience, kindness, or understanding can eventually change them. This belief often comes from a good heart. You assume that if someone truly understands how their behavior affects others, they will naturally want to improve. You think another honest conversation, another act of forgiveness, or another chance will finally inspire them to become different. But this expectation often traps you in a cycle that slowly drains your confidence, your energy, and your peace of mind. The reality is that many toxic people are fully aware of the impact they have. Their actions are not always the result of confusion or misunderstanding. In many cases, they have learned through years of experience that manipulation, guilt, intimidation, or emotional pressure help them get what they want. Behaviors that produce rewards tend to become habits, and habits repeated long enough become part of a person's character. This is why waiting for someone to transform simply because you continue showing compassion can become one of the most costly decisions you ever make. Every time you ignore disrespect, hoping it is only temporary, you silently teach the other person that there are no real consequences for crossing your boundaries. Every time you excuse repeated manipulation because you believe they are having a difficult day, you give them another opportunity to repeat the same pattern. Over time, the problem becomes less about their behavior and more about your willingness to accept it. Toxic people often recognize this long before you do. They notice how much disappointment you are willing to tolerate, how many broken promises you will forgive, and how many chances you will continue offering. Once they discover your limits are flexible, they begin pushing them even further. People often confuse potential with reality. They become attached to the person they imagine someone could become rather than accepting who that person consistently chooses to be. They remember brief moments of kindness and allow those moments to outweigh months of disrespect. They convince themselves that the next apology will be sincere, that this time things will finally change, or that enough love can repair deeply rooted patterns. Hope becomes a powerful illusion because it keeps you focused on a future that has not arrived while preventing you from dealing with the present as it truly exists. Instead of evaluating someone's words, observe their repeated actions. Actions reveal priorities, while promises often reveal only intentions. A person who genuinely wants to change demonstrates it through consistent behavior, personal accountability, and sustained effort, not through emotional speeches after causing damage. Another reason people struggle to let go of this expectation is that they fear what acceptance might require. If you admit that someone is unlikely to change, you may also have to accept difficult decisions. You may need stronger boundaries, less contact, or even complete distance. Those choices can feel painful because they force you to release the version of the relationship you hope would exist. And refusing to accept reality does not preserve the relationship, it only prolongs your suffering. Every day spent waiting for someone else to become different is another day you postpone your own growth and emotional freedom. Wisdom begins the moment you stop investing your energy in changing another person's character and start investing it in protecting your own peace, because your responsibility has never been to transform someone who refuses to transform themselves, but to recognize the difference between genuine change and repeated patterns disguised as temporary mistakes. Rule 2. Never fight on their battlefield. One of the smartest decisions you can make when dealing with toxic people is refusing to fight on the battlefield they have carefully created. Every manipulative person has a preferred environment where they feel strongest. It is rarely a place of logic, honesty, or mutual respect. Instead, it is a space filled with emotional confusion, constant distractions, personal attacks, and endless arguments that never reach a real conclusion. The moment you step into that environment, you begin playing by rules that were designed to exhaust you rather than help you find the truth. You may enter the conversation believing that facts will settle the disagreement, but before long you find yourself defending things you never said, explaining decisions that need no justification, and trying to prove your intentions to someone who has already decided to misunderstand you. This is not an accident. It is a strategy that shifts your attention away from the real issue and places it entirely on your reaction. Toxic people understand that emotions can overpower reason. They know that if they can make you angry enough, frustrated enough, or defensive enough, your judgment begins to weaken. Instead of thinking clearly, you react impulsively. You raise your voice because they raised theirs. You interrupt because they interrupted you. You become so focused on winning the argument that you fail to notice the argument itself has become meaningless. While you are trying to explain your perspective, they continue changing the subject, bringing up old mistakes, twisting your words, questioning your character instead of discussing the original problem. Every Every minute spent chasing these distractions moves you farther away from resolution and deeper into their preferred form of conflict. Many people mistakenly believe that the louder, faster, or more detailed they argue, the greater their chances of being understood. In reality, excessive explanation often gives manipulative individuals more material to distort. They listen less to understand and more to identify weaknesses they can exploit. Every emotional confession becomes future ammunition. Every insecurity you reveal may later be used to control or shame you. They pay close attention to what triggers you because they know that once they discover your emotional pressure points, they can press them whenever they want to regain control of the situation. Remaining calm in these moments is not a sign of weakness or indifference. It is evidence of discipline. Calmness prevents someone else from deciding how you feel, what you say, and how you respond. A composed person is difficult to manipulate because they refuse to surrender control of their emotions. This does not mean suppressing your feelings or pretending nothing affects you. It means recognizing that not every challenge deserves an immediate reaction. Sometimes the strongest response is a pause. Sometimes it is changing the subject. Sometimes it is leaving the conversation entirely. Refusing to participate in unnecessary conflict denies toxic people the emotional reward they often seek. The greatest advantage you possess is the ability to choose where your energy goes. Every unnecessary argument demands attention, patience, and emotional strength that could have been invested elsewhere. Each pointless conflict steals time from your goals, your relationships, and your personal growth. People who constantly pull you into emotional battles are asking you to spend your most valuable resource on problems they have no intention of solving. By refusing to engage on their terms, you stop rewarding manipulative behavior with your attention. You begin responding with intention instead of impulse, choosing clarity over chaos, restraint over reaction, and self-control over emotional surrender, making it increasingly difficult for anyone to pull you into conflicts designed not to reveal the truth but to consume your peace and distract you from what truly deserves your focus. Rule 3. Protect your energy like a valuable investment. Your energy is one of the most valuable resources you possess, yet most people protect it far less carefully than they protect their money, possessions, or reputation. You would never hand your wallet to a stranger and expect it to be returned untouched, but many people hand over their emotional energy every single day without hesitation. One careless comment ruins their mood. One negative opinion destroys their confidence. One manipulative conversation occupies their thoughts for hours, sometimes even days. They replay every word, imagine better responses, and carry the emotional weight long after the other person has already moved on. This is how toxic individuals gain influence. They do not always need to control your actions if they can control your attention. The moment they dominate your thoughts, they begin stealing something far more valuable than your time. They begin stealing your peace. Every day begins with a limited supply of mental and emotional strength. How you spend that supply determines the quality of your decisions, your relationships, and your progress. If most of your energy is consumed by unnecessary conflict, endless worry, or trying to satisfy impossible people, very little remains for building the life you actually want. Success, creativity, discipline, and personal growth all require focused energy. They cannot thrive in a mind that is constantly distracted by emotional chaos. This is why protecting your energy is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of wisdom. It means recognizing that not every problem deserves your attention and not every opinion deserves your response. Toxic people often survive by creating constant emotional demands. They complain without seeking solutions. They criticize without offering support. They create drama where none exists because drama guarantees attention. They understand that emotional people are easier to influence than emotionally balanced people. Every time you become consumed by their negativity, you unknowingly feed the cycle they have created. The more attention you give them, the more important they feel, and the more frequently they repeat the behavior. They become accustomed to your reactions and begin expecting them, knowing they can interrupt your peace whenever they choose. Learning to protect your energy requires becoming more selective about where your attention goes. Not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every message requires an immediate reply. Not every disagreement needs to become a debate. There is strength in choosing silence when speaking would accomplish nothing. There is intelligence in walking away from conversations designed only to provoke frustration. Every unnecessary conflict avoided becomes energy saved for something meaningful. Every boundary you establish protects your emotional stability from people who have shown little respect for it. Many people believe protecting their energy means avoiding all difficult situations, but that is not the goal. Life will always present challenges, criticism, and conflict. The difference lies in choosing battles that contribute to growth instead of battles that exist only to drain you. Productive challenges build resilience and character. Pointless conflicts leave you exhausted without making your life better. Wisdom comes from recognizing the difference before investing your emotional resources. Your attention shapes your reality more than you realize. Whatever occupies your mind repeatedly begins influencing your emotions, your habits, and eventually essentially your identity. If your thoughts are constantly centered on toxic individuals, they continue controlling a portion of your life even in their absence. By redirecting your energy toward your goals, your health, your knowledge, and relationships built on mutual respect, you gradually weaken the influence of negativity. The less emotional energy you waste trying to fix, impress, or outlast people committed to chaos, the more strength you have available to build confidence, create opportunities, make better decisions, develop inner stability, and invest in a future shaped by purpose instead of emotional exhaustion. Rule 4. Learn to recognize hidden manipulation. One of the greatest advantages you can develop in life is the ability to recognize manipulation before it takes control of your thoughts and emotions. Most people imagine manipulation as something obvious, dramatic, or aggressive, but the most effective forms are usually quiet and difficult to detect. They arrive disguised as concern, humor, advice, affection, or even sympathy. That is what makes them dangerous. You lower your guard because the words appear harmless, yet beneath them lies an attempt to influence your decisions, weaken your confidence, or make you question your own judgment. Toxic people understand that direct control often creates resistance, so they prefer subtle influence. Instead of ordering you to think a certain way, they guide your emotions until you arrive at the conclusion they wanted from the beginning. One of the most common tactics is making you doubt your own perception. You remember a conversation clearly, but suddenly you are told that it never happened that way. You express your feelings only to hear that you are overreacting or imagining problems that do not exist. Over time, repeated denial begins to create confusion. You start questioning your memory instead of questioning the person who keeps changing the story. Once uncertainty enters your mind, manipulation becomes much easier because confident people are difficult to control, while confused people constantly seek reassurance from the very individuals creating the confusion. Another subtle strategy is the use of guilt as a form of control. Instead of respecting your decisions, a manipulative person makes you feel responsible for their emotions. They suggest that your boundaries are selfish, your independence is betrayal, or your personal success somehow hurts them. They rarely ask directly for what they want. Instead, they create emotional pressure until you voluntarily give in just to remove the discomfort. You begin making decisions not because they are right, but because you want to escape feelings of guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing someone. This gradual surrender of personal choice slowly transfers control of your life into someone else's hands. Manipulation also appears through selective kindness. A toxic person may alternate between criticism and affection, creating emotional uncertainty. One day they praise you, making you feel valued. The next day they withdraw attention, become cold, or offer harsh criticism without explanation. This unpredictable pattern keeps you seeking their approval because you never know which version of them will appear. Instead of questioning their inconsistency, you begin questioning yourself, believing that if you behave differently, the kindness will return permanently. This cycle creates emotional dependence because your mood becomes tied to their unpredictable behavior rather than your own inner stability. Words alone rarely reveal manipulation as clearly as patterns do. Anyone can have a bad day, lose patience, or make a mistake. The difference lies in repetition. Honest people learn from their actions and make genuine efforts to improve. Manipulative people repeat the same behaviors while changing only the excuses. They apologize without changing. They promise without following through. They express regret only after facing consequences. If you focus only on isolated moments, you may continue giving endless chances. If you observe consistent patterns, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Developing awareness requires slowing down your emotional reactions and becoming a careful observer of behavior. Instead of asking whether someone's words sound convincing, ask whether their actions consistently support those words. Instead of becoming distracted by dramatic apologies or emotional explanations, pay attention to long-term habit. A character is not revealed during moments of comfort, but through repeated choices made over time. The more skilled you become at recognizing these hidden patterns, the less vulnerable you become to emotional manipulation. Because awareness replaces confusion, observation replaces assumption, and clear judgment leaves very little space for anyone to quietly shape your decisions through deception, guilt, inconsistency, or carefully disguised emotional control. Rule 5. Stop explaining yourself to everyone. One of the quiet habits that keeps many people trapped in unhealthy relationships is the constant need to explain themselves. They believe that if they can just find the right words, the other person will finally understand their intentions, respect their decisions, or accept their boundaries. They spend hours preparing arguments, defending their choices, and offering detailed reasons for every action they take. At first, this seems reasonable because healthy relationships thrive on honest communication. But with toxic people, excessive explanation often becomes a weakness rather than a strength. The more information you provide, the more opportunities they have to question, criticize, distort, or dismiss what you say. Instead of listening to understand, they listen to identify points they can challenge. Your explanation becomes the beginning of another debate instead of the end of one. Manipulative individuals often encourage this cycle because it gives them control over the conversation. Every reason you provide is treated as an invitation for negotiation. If you say you cannot attend an event because you are busy, they argue that you can make time. If you explain that you need space, they accuse you of being distant or uncaring. If you justify a personal decision, they search for flaws in your reasoning until you begin defending choices that never required anyone else's approval. Before long, you are no longer making decisions based on what is right for your life. You are making decisions based on whether you can successfully convince someone else to agree with them. This subtle shift gives away your authority because you begin acting as though your choices require permission rather than confidence. There is an important difference between communicating with respect and seeking validation. Respect means expressing yourself clearly and honestly because the other person deserves openness. Validation means hoping someone else approves of your decision before you feel comfortable making it. Toxic people often recognize this need for approval and use it to maintain influence. They know that if they refuse to accept your explanation, you will probably offer another one, then another, and another. Each new attempt gives them more control over your emotions because they decide when the conversation ends. As long as you continue trying to satisfy them with words, they remain in the position of judge while you remain in the position of defending yourself. Confident people understand that not every decision needs universal agreement. They know that being misunderstood is sometimes unavoidable. You cannot force another person to accept your perspective if they have already decided to reject it. Trying harder does not always produce better results. In fact, endless explanations often create the appearance of uncertainty. When you constantly defend your choices, some people begin assuming there must be something wrong with those choices simply because you seem desperate to justify them. Quiet confidence sends a different message. It communicates that your decisions have already been carefully considered and do not depend on outside approval to remain valid. Healthy boundaries are often simple. They do not require lengthy speeches or emotional debates. A clear answer delivered with calm certainty is usually enough. People who respect you will recognize your honesty even if they disagree. Those who seek control will become frustrated because they can no longer extend the conversation into endless conflict. This frustration often reveals their true intentions more clearly than anything they say. Choosing not to over-explain is not about becoming cold, rude, or dismissive. It is about understanding that your time, emotional energy, and peace of mind are valuable resources. Every unnecessary defense of your character or choices consumes attention that could be directed toward your goals, your growth, and your well-being. The moment you stop believing that every decision requires approval from difficult people, you begin reclaiming your independence, strengthening your confidence, protecting your boundaries, and allowing your actions to speak with a clarity that endless explanations could never achieve. Rule 6. Distance is sometimes the highest form of wisdom. One of the hardest lessons in life is accepting that distance is sometimes the healthiest response to a toxic person. Many people grow up believing that every relationship can be repaired with enough patience, forgiveness, and sacrifice. They are taught that walking away is a sign of weakness or failure, so they continue investing in relationships that repeatedly damage their peace of mind. They convince themselves that leaving would mean giving up too soon, while staying is proof of loyalty and strength. But loyalty without wisdom can become self-destruction. There comes a point when protecting your well-being becomes more important than preserving a connection that consistently leaves you emotionally exhausted. The strongest decision is not always to hold on. Sometimes it is knowing exactly when to let go. Distance is often misunderstood because people associate it with anger or revenge. In reality, creating distance is not about punishing another person. It is about protecting yourself from patterns that have already proven harmful. You are not trying to change them through silence or force them to recognize your value through absence. You are simply refusing to place yourself in situations where disrespect, manipulation, or emotional chaos have become predictable. Every healthy boundary begins with recognizing what repeatedly harms your peace and deciding that you no longer have to participate in it. This decision is not driven by hatred. It is driven by clarity. Many toxic people rely on constant access to your emotions. They expect immediate responses, endless explanations, and unlimited opportunities to regain influence whenever they feel they are losing control. When that access disappears, their ability to manipulate also begins to weaken. This is why they often react strongly when you establish distance. They may accuse you of being selfish, dramatic, or uncaring. They may attempt to create guilt by reminding you of everything they have done for you or suggesting that you are abandoning them. These reactions are designed to make you question your decision and return to the familiar cycle. Understanding this pattern allows you to see these emotional tactics for what they truly are rather than becoming trapped by them once again. Distance also creates something that constant conflict never allows: perspective. When you are surrounded by manipulation every day, unhealthy behavior begins to feel normal. You adapt to criticism, excuses, broken promises, and emotional pressure until they become part of your routine. It is only after stepping away that you begin noticing how much energy was being consumed by those interactions. You realize how often you felt anxious before conversations, how frequently you questioned your own judgment, and how rarely you experienced genuine peace. Separation gives your mind the space to recover from confusion and observe the relationship without the emotional fog created by daily exposure. There is also a difference between temporary distance and permanent distance. Some relationships improve when healthy boundaries boundaries are respected and consistent change follows. Others reveal that the problems were never temporary but deeply rooted patterns that continue regardless of how many chances are given. The purpose of distance is not to predict the future, but to create enough space to evaluate reality honestly. Instead of making decisions based on guilt, fear, or hope, you begin making them based on consistent behavior and observable fact. Protecting your peace requires accepting that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your life. Relationships should contribute to growth, mutual respect, and emotional stability rather than constant stress and uncertainty. Every person you allow into your inner circle influences your thinking, your confidence, and your habits. Choosing distance from those who repeatedly create harm is an investment in your future because it allows your attention, emotional strength, and inner stability to be directed toward people and environments that encourage respect, honesty, personal growth, and a life no longer shaped by the constant weight of unnecessary emotional conflict. Rule 7. Build a life that doesn't depend on their approval. One of the strongest forms of freedom a person can achieve is building a life that no longer depends on the approval of others. Many people spend years making decisions based not on what they truly believe, but on what they think will earn acceptance, praise, or validation. They choose careers to impress their families, remain in unhealthy relationships to avoid criticism, stay silent because they fear rejection, and hide their true ambitions because they worry about being judged. Without realizing it, they allow other people's opinions to become the invisible force directing their lives. This dependence creates a dangerous weakness because the moment your happiness relies on someone else's approval, they gain the power to influence your emotions, your confidence, and your decisions. Toxic people understand this better than most. They recognize that individuals who constantly seek validation are easier to manipulate because they can control them through praise and criticism. A compliment makes you work harder to please them. Harsh opinion makes you question your worth. Their approval becomes a reward you chase, while their disappointment becomes a punishment you desperately try to avoid. Over time, you stop asking yourself what is right for your own life and begin asking what will keep them satisfied. This quiet shift slowly erodes your independence because your identity becomes shaped by external reactions instead of internal conviction. True confidence is built differently. It does not come from hearing that you are valuable. It comes from repeatedly proving to yourself that you can overcome challenges, keep your promises, and remain faithful to your principles even when no one is watching. Every disciplined action strengthens your relationship with yourself. Every difficult decision made according to your values reinforces the belief that your judgment can be trusted. Confidence grows through action, not applause. It develops when you stop measuring your worth by the number of people who agree with you and begin measuring it by your ability to remain consistent with the person you want to become. Building independence from approval also requires accepting an uncomfortable reality. Not everyone will understand your choices, and not everyone has to. Every meaningful path in life attracts criticism because people naturally judge what they do not understand. If you constantly change direction to satisfy every opinion, you will spend your entire life moving according to someone else's expectations instead of your own purpose. There will always be people who believe you should think differently, act differently, or live differently. Trying to satisfy all of them is impossible because their expectations often contradict one another. The more people you try to please, the less authentic your own life becomes. Developing this independence begins with investing in areas that strengthen your character rather than your image. Learn new skills because they expand your abilities, not because they impress others. Take care of your health because your body supports every goal you pursue, not because someone approves of your appearance. Read, study, and grow because knowledge improves your judgment, not because it earns admiration. Every investment you make in yourself creates a stronger foundation that cannot be taken away by someone's opinion or temporary approval. As your sense of purpose becomes stronger, criticism begins to lose much of its power. Praise becomes enjoyable but no longer necessary. Rejection becomes disappointing but no longer devastating. You stop treating every opinion as a verdict on your value because you understand that your worth was never determined by someone else's agreement. This inner stability changes the way toxic people affect you. Their attempts to manipulate through guilt, shame, or approval become far less effective because they no longer control the emotional rewards you seek, allowing your decisions to be guided by principles, discipline, self-respect, and a clear vision of the life you choose to build rather than the expectations others try to impose upon you. Rule 8. Master emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is one of the rarest qualities a person can develop, yet it is also one of the most powerful. Many people believe strength is measured by physical ability, intelligence, or the capacity to dominate others, but true strength is revealed in the moments when you have every reason to react and still choose self-control. Toxic people often rely on emotional reactions because emotions cloud judgment. They know that an angry person is easier to manipulate than a calm one, and a frustrated mind is less likely to think clearly. The moment someone else can dictate your emotional state, they begin influencing influencing your decisions, your words, and ultimately the direction of your life. This is why mastering your emotions is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about refusing to surrender control of your mind to someone else's behavior. Every day presents situations that test your emotional discipline. A disrespectful comment, an unfair accusation, an unexpected betrayal, or a deliberate attempt to provoke you can instantly trigger anger, disappointment, or frustration. These emotions are natural. They are part of being human. The real challenge is deciding what happens after those emotions appear. Most people react immediately because reacting feels satisfying in the moment. They answer insult with insult, raise their voice to match someone else's, or make decisions while overwhelmed by temporary feelings. Unfortunately, actions taken in emotional moments often create consequences that last far longer than the emotions themselves. A few seconds of uncontrolled anger can damage years of trust, destroy valuable opportunities, or create conflicts that never needed to exist. Toxic individuals understand this pattern well. They may deliberately criticize you in public, question your abilities, or make false accusations simply to provoke a reaction. They are less interested in the original issue than in watching you lose control. Once you become emotional, they shift attention away from their behavior and focus entirely on your reaction. Suddenly, instead of discussing what they did, everyone is discussing how you responded. This is why emotional discipline becomes such a powerful defense. By refusing to react impulsively, you deny manipulative people the outcome they were hoping to achieve. Calmness forces the conversation back toward facts instead of emotions. Developing emotional discipline requires practice rather than perfection. It begins with creating a small pause between what happens to you and how you respond. That pause may last only a few seconds, but within those seconds lies your greatest power. Instead of reacting automatically, you ask yourself whether your response will improve the situation or simply satisfy a temporary emotion. You learn to separate feelings from decisions, understanding that emotions provide information but should not always determine your actions. Fear may encourage caution, but it should not prevent necessary growth. Anger may reveal injustice, but it should not dictate reckless behavior. Sadness deserves acknowledgement, but it should not convince you that difficult moments define your future. Emotional discipline also means accepting that you cannot control other people's actions, opinions, or attitudes. You cannot stop someone from being dishonest, disrespectful, or manipulative. What remains entirely within your control is the way you respond. This realization is liberating because it shifts your attention away from changing others and toward mastering yourself. Instead of wasting energy trying to control the uncontrollable, you invest that energy in strengthening your own character. Over time, this inner stability becomes visible in every area of life. Your decisions become wiser because they are guided by reason instead of impulse. Your relationships become healthier because they are built on mutual respect rather than emotional dependence. Your confidence grows because you know your peace cannot be easily stolen by someone else's behavior. People who master their emotions are not free from pain, disappointment, or conflict. They simply refuse to allow those experiences to become permanent rulers of their minds. They understand that every challenge presents a choice between reacting instinctively and responding intentionally. That choice determines whether difficult people shape your future or merely become temporary obstacles along the way. The greatest victory is never proving someone else wrong. It is proving to yourself that your peace is stronger than their chaos, your discipline is greater than their manipulation, and your future will always be guided by your own character rather than someone else's behavior. Remember this: the moment you master your emotions is the moment you become truly difficult to control. And when no one can control your mind, no one can control your life.